Greetings, brethren. It is I, the Donkey, and welcome back to Donkey vs. Beer. On this very exciting episode of Beer of the Gods, we shall be looking at the one, the only, Einherjar Sold. Now, this particular one I should probably translate. The Einherjar are Odin's or Wotan's army in Valhalla. They are handpicked by the Valkyrie to be his army in Ragnarok. And Sold is a German word for the pay a soldier receives, which is also, interestingly enough, where the word soldier comes from. And also where the word Söldner, which I suppose is probably the word, like the etymological source for soldier. In German that means mercenary, so it's someone who fights for money, which I guess all soldiers really do. So this is the Einherjar's pay, basically. So yeah, I'm kind of worried about this one, and this might end up being a short video, which is also why I kind of stuttered at the beginning of this video, because I might have to cut out the intro and then add it to a double feature episode, because I'm not so sure about this one. I've heard about them before. I don't think I've ever actually had one. This is a barley wine. So it's a really strong beer, 9.5%, which in itself isn't really a problem because there are traditional German beers that I've had in the past that are called Doppelbock, which can go up to 12%. And that's fine, and they're tasty, they're delicious. But with this one, I'm not sure, because I have been told that barley wine is actually quite different from Doppelbock, and the people I talked to about them didn't really like them particularly much, so we'll see how I feel about them. With this being my very first one. That has a very interesting smell. But it does kind of remind me actually of a bock kind of smell. So it's there's definitely still that maltiness and sweetness. So yeah, we'll get out of here. Knife. We'll just see what we see. Okay, looks like we're not gonna get any particular crown on this one. I guess that's why they call it a wine, because it just kind of, you know, loses that sort of foamy aspect of a beer. Also doesn't look particularly fizzy. So yeah, I'm hoping we're somewhere in the sort of vicinity of what I, you know, like ales and stuff like that. I'm definitely also drinking this colder than it's supposed to be had. It's supposed to be had at about 10 to 12 degrees. This is definitely colder than that because it's in my fridge, so it'll be somewhere around 5 to 6 degrees probably. But you know what? I'm sure that won't change all that much either way. So let's have a go. Yeah, oh boy, that's not fizzy at all. That definitely is a lot more like wine. So I don't hate it. I'm gonna say that right away. But I also don't think that this in any way classifies as a beer. Yeah, this really does just remind me a lot more of wine, which again I'm not, you know, opposed to on a base level, but it doesn't really carry a lot of the sort of hallmarks of a beer. Which it doesn't have to be fizzy. Obviously, there's plenty of beers that are practically not fizzy or have very little fizz, such as Guinness, which is also a very non-fizzy beer. But with this, I'm just getting more. It also has that immediate effect that I usually get when I drink wine, in that I get warm. Like, oof, you know, I feel immediately like the room has gone 5 degrees warmer. Not necessarily a bad thing. I'm not much of a wine drinker, if I'm honest, but the same thing happens with mead, which I do like. So, yeah. You know what? I think if you go into this with a different expectation, then this actually does become quite pleasant. It does have a very sort of pronounced malty taste to it. It's very sweet as well. Not very, very sweet, but there's a very distinct sweetness to the malt, and it's also quite bitter. Interestingly, I would definitely liken this somewhat to a bitter mead in terms of the sort of sweetness level and the bitterness. But then it does have that sort of malt taste, and it doesn't have, because most wines, because they're made from fruit or honey, they have quite a bit of a sourness to them. They sort of an acidity and sometimes even acrid taste. And this doesn't have that. It kind of replaces that whole aspect with just a malty sort of grain taste. And that is really intriguing. Is it something that I would want to have all the time? No. But it is certainly a very interesting drink. Yeah, it's definitely something I would sort of, you know, have at a party with other people and be like, what do you guys think? But specifically not give them an expectation of a beer beforehand, because I think that ruins it. When in these videos, when I have a beer in front of me, which is also incidentally why I don't do mixed drinks, beer with cola or beer with lemonade or whatever, Radler and Diesel and all that kind of stuff, because it just, to me, that's not what a beer is, and it gives me false expectations, and I generally won't like it as much. I'd probably enjoy something like Radler or Diesel more if you just gave it to me and said nothing and just made me guess what it is, because that way, I wouldn't put myself into a specific expectational position, I suppose. So yeah, I can definitely see myself drinking something like this. This is definitely something more to be savored, and you'd have this over an evening or throughout a dinner. I think this would go fairly well with, various foods. Actually, I think this would also go really well with desserts. So anytime you eat something sweet, this might actually go really well with it, because the sort of heavy bitterness that goes on there, and it doesn't linger, the bitterness, which is very nice. It's not sort of an IPA bitterness. I think that would cut really nicely with really sweet foods. But yeah, again, if you put beer on the bottle, it just puts an expectation into people's heads that this really doesn't fulfill. And I mean, it does say barley wine on the bottle, so that's nice, but it also does say strong beer, and I just don't agree. I don't think you can call this a beer, even if, technically it is or whatever. To me, it just falls so far outside of the category of, what I would consider a beer, that it doesn't really do it for me in that way. But again, approaching it from a different aspect, just turning the bottle around and ignoring it, I actually find this quite tasty. Yeah, I actually find this quite tasty, because I will say this, what bothers me about wines mostly is the heavy acidity to them, which is also kind of why I prefer ciders, because I do prefer these sort of acidity and sourness of an apple to that of a grape. I find grapes can be, when they're sour, they're really sort of kind of sour, whereas an apple is just kind of, it's just gentler, right? And so I prefer that. Obviously, cider is also really regional here where I live, so it's quite popular anyway, and widely sourced. I mean, if you go to a drink store, and I said it again, at some point we'll have to have a field trip on this channel where I go to one of those stores and show you around. But they usually, where I live, they have massive sections of cider, because there's just so much cider locally as well. And this, in my opinion, should be sitting in the same shelf as that. I think that way you could market this way better than as beer. And but I do really, to get back to the point, I apologize. It would be, I would just enjoy this more as a replacement for a wine. I could also imagine this going really well with certain other things. I'm not opposed to mixing wine with things because I'm not a Frenchman, so I wouldn't have a problem. For example, I think red wine is quite nice when you cut it with a hell of a lot of water. And I actually think this might be similar, although not as much water. Because when you have a red wine and you do about this much red wine and this much water, it kind of becomes almost like an iced tea, and it's really nice. And I'm sure the Frenchman just got very upset. But you know what? That's your own problem for thinking wine is good. With this one, I would probably go more, maybe somewhere in the area of 50-50, maybe even less water, just a little bit of water to top it up, just to mellow it out a little bit. But yeah, in general, I'm definitely enjoying this glass. But you can see, I can feel the heat rising in my face. I don't know if you can actually see it, but whew, there's definitely some of that going on. It is quite enjoyable, I must say. The more I drink of it, the more I get used to the sort of initial hit of bitterness. But because it doesn't linger, it's actually quite good. Yeah, so this is actually nice. Now, how do I rate this? Because it's not a beer. I am just gonna use my standard ratings, I guess, but I need to put the caveat in front of it that this isn't a beer, and you shouldn't expect that. You should expect something more like a wine. And if you don't like wine, but you really like beer, give this a go, because this might bridge the gap for you. This might be just what, pushes you into I don't know, enjoying something that's wine-like. Kind of the same way I tell people who don't like wine to try mead. Also, I just had a great idea. I want to try to mix this with mead. That could be really good. Anyway, I think I'm going to give this a 6 out of 10. I think it is quite enjoyable. Again, it's not a beer. I'm not a wine rating person, so I couldn't tell you how I would rate this against other wines, but it is certainly something that I will buy again just to experiment, just to maybe just even to enjoy it. I mean, out of this line of beers, in this case it not being a beer, it is definitely one of the better ones for what it is. So yeah, I'm not opposed to this one, and I'll let you know at some point. I've made a little list. I've made a tiny. I don't know where it is, but I made an actual note block list thing where I noted down various beers that I was gonna try on different kinds of seasons and all that sort of thing. And I'm gonna have videos, I think, throughout the channel's history, every now and then, where I sort of revisit a few beers and tell you what I thought in various situations and whether or not that affects the rating. Things like I had a Weissbier a while ago where I said that would be really good in the summer. So obviously that takes till next summer, but I also had a few beers that I'm gonna retry in winter and see if I like them any better, because when I tried them it was like 25 degrees and I was already sweating, so I wasn't getting much out of them. This also gonna be hell in the summer, because it's warm enough in here with this, and I keep my room at a frosty 20 degrees. That's, I think, it might be 69 actually in Fahrenheit. I like a cold room. I am so hot. I don't need the room to be particularly warm. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. I would certainly say give this a go. And do please subscribe to the channel, because that would be awesome. But other than that, I hope that you just come back on another day for another beer. Take care, guys.